Hello everyone, welcome to 2021 Vacation Bible School for this summer. My name is Shakara and I will be instructing the adult class for this week. So let's go ahead and kick off the first day. Today we will be covering Daniel 3, the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And our theme for today is stand true and armor up with the truth while wearing the belt of truth, which is what it says on the guide. So let's go ahead and get into the scripture reading. We will be reading from the book of Daniel, chapter 3. So I'm going to give us about 7 minutes to read the chapter, and then we will regroup. I'll go over a summary of the reading, and then we will also reflect over several points from the reading. So let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so now that we all have read Daniel chapter 3, let's go ahead and go over a summary of, the story, as well as point out some key points that stuck out to us, mainly myself, throughout reading this. And I hope that some of these points are similar to the ones that you all gathered as you read through Daniel 3. Okay, so our story begins with King Nebuchadnezzar conquering the people of God and taking a lot of them back to Babylon. Our story focuses on three specific people: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were living in exile in a foreign land, but they were determined to stay true to God, although they worked for the government. And this wasn't easy because there were certain laws and certain expectations because they were under rule of King Nebuchadnezzar. And so our story points out that King Nebuchadnezzar made this image, this big idol of gold, whose height was, according to the scripture, 60 cubits, and its breadth 6 cubits. And so there is this huge idol about 90 feet high and 90 feet wide that he had built and placed for people of all nations and all languages to come worship and bow down whenever they were told, or whenever the music rang. They were to come down, bow down, and worship this idol. And now, according to the Jews and, the 10 Commandments of believers, Christians, Exodus 24:5 says that you shall not make yourself a carved image. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. And so they had this choice to obey King Nebuchadnezzar's laws and to continue to have life and to continue to not go against the grain and blend in and conform to society, or to remain true to God and continue to worship God and show their devotion to Him, their Creator. And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego chose to remain true to God, which is our theme for today, armor up with the truth. And so as the story progresses, King Nebuchadnezzar's soldiers come back and report to him that, there are these three people who refuse to bow down to the statue. And King Nebuchadnezzar initially goes, okay, I want to talk to these people and confirm that they will refuse to bow down. In Daniel 3:13 through 15, King Nebuchadnezzar threatens Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and it reads, "Is it true that, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now, if you are ready when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning, fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands?" And so, even with these threats from King Nebuchadnezzar, that if they remained faithful to their God, they would be killed, burned in a fiery furnace. They continued to refuse to conform to society, to conform to King Nebuchadnezzar's policies, and follow God, and fully entrust themselves into God's hands, which is the first lesson, or the second lesson. The first lesson is to remain true and faithful to God, which is them following his law of commandments. And then the second lesson that I gathered was that they entrusted themselves into God's hands, despite the threats that King Nebuchadnezzar placed on them. And so as the story continued, King Nebuchadnezzar was furious because, these three people, these three commoners, compared to a king, refused to follow his rules and bow down to this big idol of gold that he had built for people to bow down and worship. And so in 19 through 23, verses 19 through 23, we learned that because he was so angry, he ordered that the furnace be set 7 degrees higher, or 7 times higher than its original setting. And it was so hot that even King Nebuchadnezzar's soldiers, who were walking the three up to the furnace to be cast down, died in that process. However, even though they were in the furnace, it says that they were not burned. Their hair was not singed. It says their clothes were not burned, and they didn't even smell like smoke. And so this next lesson is that God came through for them. They were expecting to die. The fire was set 7 times its original heat. And despite these circumstances and despite these obstacles and the setting, God came through and they survived. And another point that I wanted to stress out or point out was that God didn't let them go through this alone. It says in the scripture that it says in verse 24 and 25, "Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste. He declared to his counselors, 'Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire?' They answered and said to the king, 'True, O king.' He answered and said, 'But I see 4 men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the appearance of the 4th is like a son of God's.'" And so it's just important to point out that God didn't let them go through this trial alone. He was right there with them in this fiery furnace, walking with them, watching over them, and protecting them through this trial that they faced. And so those are my 4 lessons for this story. Number 1 was that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego remained true and faithful to God. Number 2, they entrusted themselves into God's hands and did not succumb to the circumstances that were presented to them. Number 3, God came through for them. And number 4, God was with them in their trials. So thank you, and I pray that you all have a great day and you are able to take these 4 lessons and apply them to your everyday lives and continued walks with Christ.